Good morning, everybody. I'd like to welcome everyone along to today's webinar. It's fantastic to see so many people attending this morning. My name is Mandy Ball. I'm one of the business development managers with Peninsula. I've been with the company for 9.5 years. And then during that time, I help businesses manage their issues with staff, HR, health and safety, and everything in between. Today we're joined by my lovely colleague Emily Sheppard. Emily is one of our consultants in the Cork office, and she's going to give you some hints and tips and some updates in how best to master staff management. We'll give you some hints and tips on poor performance, misconduct, and what you can use to deal with those issues as they arise. We have received a considerable amount of questions prior to the event, but if you do have any additional questions or queries, please pop them into the chat box there and we will get them answered for you. We'll do a quick question and answer session at the end, but for now, I'm going to hand you over to Emily and we'll get started. Thank you.
Thanks, Mandy. I appreciate it. And as Mandy said, yeah, welcome everybody. And I suppose we'll get started going through some of the slides to start. So as Mandy said, today's webinar is on mastering staff management, a guide to dealing with poor performance and misconduct. So it's a really interesting one that we have today. So on today's agenda, we'll be discussing performance management, disciplinary procedures and how to improve conduct and performance, how to ensure fair procedures, and we'll discuss a couple of real world examples as well. Brilliant. So generally what we'd say, it's not enough to simply create policies and guidelines. Managers have to show up and support the organisation, the operation and the rest of their team. Managers need to learn how to set expectations, build supportive relationships and follow up any kind of queries or any processes in a timely fashion. So as we said there, set clear expectations, set measurable performance objectives. It's really important to develop your employees as well. Build a culture of trust in the company and review your policies and your procedures and your disciplinary processes fairly and consistently. Perfect. So why would we take disciplinary action? So you should take disciplinary action in your organisation if it is alleged that a rule has either been broken or an offence has been committed. So I'll give you a few examples. I suppose it's just important to bear in mind that the list is never exhaustive, and what goes into the handbooks as well, the list of misconduct is never going to be exhaustive as well. So I suppose if we were to take breaking a rule, for example, so an individual might break rules in relation to health and safety, they might use the email or the internet incorrectly, or they might have unauthorized use of it, and they could be persistently sick or persistently late. Whereas an offence could be, say an individual needs to drive for work, it's part of their role, and now they have received a driving ban. So that would be where we might need to look at bringing in a disciplinary procedure. So these would be normally something that would be listed within the employee handbook under minor, major or gross misconduct. I suppose just to give more of an idea, gross misconduct would tend to be very serious in nature, much more serious than the other forms of misconduct. For gross misconduct, you could be looking at theft or physical violence or bullying or discrimination, harassment, those kind of things. But I suppose depending on specifically what would need to go within your own handbook. And in the handbook as well, it's important to realise we don't have to list every possible form of misconduct. It's impossible to know them all, but I suppose just to give yourself and your staff a general idea. And we might just take a poll there at the end of that, Mandy, just I suppose to see what we have there. Perfect. I actually can't see the poll, Mandy. I'd say you might have to have a look at that one yourself as well.
Sorry, Emily, I was muted there. I'll let you know once the answers come through, okay?
Perfect. That's fantastic. Brilliant. So it should pop up on the screen as well for you guys if you want to just vote quickly. And I suppose just let me know as well.
Okay, Emily, we have the results in. So the question was,
Brilliant.
have you taken an employee through a disciplinary? Yes,
Yeah,
61%, no, 30%, and I wouldn't know where to start, 9%.
perfect. So that's a good amount there, I suppose, to think. I suppose even 60% of people have been through a disciplinary process before, so they kind of have some idea as well themselves. But no, that's a good number. So I suppose the purpose of disciplinary action, it's, I suppose, there to resolve problems within the business and situations that might arise constructively. We're not looking to catch employees by surprise and springing allegations on them, anything like that. It's a very open process. We're there as well to listen to mitigation if that's an option, and listening to kind of any mitigating circumstances that the employee might bring to our attention in relation to this disciplinary process, and agree remedies. So it's, I suppose, disciplinary processes are really there to support the business, and I suppose weed out kind of any issues that can be occurring with one or more employees. It's really important as well to remember when we are looking at disciplinary processes that we should be, I suppose, the sanction should be relative to the disciplinary issue in and of itself, and to be consistent, so that we're fair across the board with similar instances of disciplinary processes. If we don't, people might say that they're being treated unfairly. It can cause other issues in the workplace. Excuse me. So it's just really important to remember those as well. Perfect. So why follow the procedures? So procedures are put in place to apply consistency and fairness. The employee may decide to take their case to an employment tribunal if we didn't treat the process fairly and follow the procedures. So I suppose for an employment tribunal, this could be at the conclusion of a disciplinary process. So, whilst we're looking to make a final decision, an employee could apply to the courts for either being unfairly dismissed or unfairly treated. So we should be dealing with them, I suppose, when it comes to the issue of what the actual issue is. So if it is a capability issue, if it's a conduct issue, we need to make sure that we're following the correct procedures so that individuals can't bring a case against us and bring a case against their employer. And then as well, just circling back to the sanctions, we need to make sure that the sanctions are relative to the misconduct or the disciplinary issue that was brought in originally. So there are 3 tests for success in an employment tribunal. Was the reason for dismissal a fair one? Was a fair, equitable and reasonable procedure followed? And has the employer acted reasonably considering the circumstances? So when we're looking at a fair reason, so I suppose for that, we'd need to consider that the process we have followed is fair and consistent. And then when we're looking at reasonable, this would be kind of, I suppose, where we're looking at sanctions. So are the sanctions relative to the occasion? Is there any mitigating factors that we should be aware of, and so on? Perfect. So I suppose we'll have a look here maybe at a scenario. So let's say, for example, you see an employee taking cash from the till with your own eyes, you've seen it, and they're putting it in their pocket. What do you do? So we're going to take a poll here now as well. And if you just have a look, it's either yes or no. Would you dismiss them on the spot? And just let us know then as well when we have some results in for that.
Just waiting for them to come up.
No problem. People are thinking. That's a good thing. We have to have a think about what we do in this situation. I think sometimes it's a tough one when you're thinking about it.
Particularly when you've seen it with your own eyes.
Exactly. That's where the difficulty comes in. Yeah.
Okay, so question was, would you dismiss the employee on the spot? Poll results, yes, 15%, no, 85%.
Wow, that's really good. I'm really surprised there. So obviously, as you guys are aware, we absolutely can't dismiss on the spot. It wouldn't be considered fair process. So even was this is would be considered gross misconduct, and absolutely, it may be seen as unfair, maybe outside of employment law, but gross misconduct dismissals need to follow the same process as all other dismissals. If we don't have a process, so without a process, a dismissal will be deemed unfair, even if the employee has done something bad. So, and instant dismissals on the spot are almost never ever considered fair. So it's really important to remember that even though there might have been really extenuating circumstances, it still wouldn't be deemed fair. So 85% there is really good. I'm actually very impressed with that. Perfect. So here we have the 5 potentially fair reasons for a dismissal. Now, procedures should always be followed, but we're looking at conduct, capability, redundancy, a statutory ban, and then some other substantial reasons. So that's SOSG or SOSR, which would be, I suppose, other kind of extenuating circumstances. Now, we still say for clients, whilst we have fair reasons for dismissal, we would always say call the advice line, call the advisors, get their expertise on it, and they will walk you through the process for all one of these. Whilst there is fair reasons, there's still a process involved for everybody involved. And there again, just flagging it, consistency and fairness is key. So consistency means we need to ensure that all employees are treated the same for the same offences. So we can't have one individual receiving a lesser sanction for what could be considered a very similar offence. And we need to ensure that the same procedure is followed for each instance. So investigation procedures, disciplinary procedures, that we have a very, very clear and robust policy, and we're continually following it no matter the individual employee. And I suppose when we're looking at investigations, we're going to be looking at, gathering appropriate evidence, witness statements, and that everything is followed through correctly. Then when we're looking at fairness, we're checking really there to make sure that the same sanctions are being given to the same offences. So this may be in the case of 2 or more people being disciplined for the same offence. It doesn't really matter if we prefer one employee or if one employee, is, favored over the other one. They still have to be treated the same. If not, we're really leaving ourselves open there to cases being brought against the company and claims of grievances, things like that. We really need to be just aware of consistency and fairness when we're looking at our procedures. So when we're looking at the fairness of the procedure, we're going to be checking to see, was it carried out in a fair manner? And have you followed your contractual procedure? So when we're looking at our contractual procedures, this is what's set out in the employment documentation. So what the consultants such as myself and the other guys in the team have drafted for you. So I suppose for our own aspect, the Peninsula documentation is extremely robust and very strong in relation to the policies and procedures. It's very clearly laid out for the staff and for the employer, and whatever is within the documentation, we need to ensure that we're following it exactly to the T, and that we're not picking up any procedural flaws as we go. Is our process and outcome proportionate to the offence? So when we're looking at proportionate, we're going to be looking at things like, maybe if an individual is late on a few occasions, this definitely wouldn't warrant a final warning. Wherever if we were looking at maybe someone being violent in the workplace or things like that, that then would be considered maybe a final warning to give to that person. We wouldn't then be looking at a verbal warning. We need to understand the severity of the incident and then pick an outcome that would be proportionate to that incident. Have we followed a fair and reasonable procedure that has been applied consistently? So when we're looking at consistency, we need to check, have we been consistent with everybody, all the employees across the board? We need to make sure that we haven't shown any favoritism, that we can show that we've followed the same process for everybody else. And I suppose here managers really need to be concerned and just aware that they're not shown to be favoring any employees, and that it is fair for everybody across the board. Okay, so we have a little example here. So here we have a care assistant versus a nursing home. In this instance, the care assistant was seen on CCTV being abusive to a resident. The employer did not follow the fair procedures, and they didn't follow the correct investigation stage. And then that employee brought a case, and in the Employee Appeals Tribunal, the individual was awarded 30,000 for an unfair dismissal claim. So whilst we can see here, this is a fantastic example, the employee arguably was in the wrong. They were being abusive to a resident, but because the employer didn't follow the correct procedures, the employee was awarded there, because it is, when we get to take a case, it is 80% kind of policies and procedures, and then 20% is really, I suppose, what actually happened in the instance what we're actually speaking about. So where we're at now, what do we need to do? We need to ensure that policies and procedures have been issued, that dignity and respect at work training should be delivered at least once a year. It's very important as well there to have regular buzz meetings with your team to keep the communication open and set performance explanations or expectations, and then also speak to ourselves, speak to Mandy, and see what we can do for yourselves to ensure that you are in a very good position, that you are protected if anything like this was to come up. And then I think, Mandy, will we move on to the Q&A now? What do you think?
Yes, I think that's a good time, Emily.
Perfect.
Give me 2 seconds.
Take your time.
Okay, now we've a lot of questions.
Oh, very good. I love
them
to hear
all.
them.
Okay, so we'll go one by one, and we'll see where we end up. Okay,
Exactly.
First one for you, Emily.
Yeah.
Once our boss's back is turned, the lads don't produce as much as when the boss is in the yard. How can I make sure production stays good?
I think in this kind of situation, again, it's really important to make sure that we're setting the goals that maybe we want to see, so that even when we're not there, the goals are being achieved. I think it's important to kind of be clear in what we are looking for. And I suppose if it's something that's ongoing, you're going to want to ensure that we're letting the individuals know that we have seen that maybe the performance or the quality of work might drop a little bit when the individual bosses or managers aren't around. I think rather than taking it as a whole, sometimes it's very easy to say, oh, when I'm gone, people are sitting around and doing nothing. I suppose it's important then to make sure, who exactly, what are we looking at, where are we kind of bringing this, I suppose, where are we getting this information from? And I suppose just reiterating to the staff that this is support performance we expect from ourselves. And only then, I suppose, once we've made it very clear, kind of on a slightly ongoing basis, that we're not happy with maybe the performance, then we might look at maybe implementing a performance improvement plan or discussing it with the individuals rather than a whole. That's what I would say.
Perfect. I think it's human nature, isn't it? When the cat's away, the mice will play. So
A little bit, and I think
the structure you have in place.
It is. It's all about what we have there to back that up. Exactly.
Okay. Next one for you, Emily. How to manage staff that say they are too busy, but are not working consistently and are doing personal tasks during work hours. I think this is coming up quite a lot more with the remote working and stuff like that.
Exactly. Yeah. So definitely, I think, well, I suppose remote working is a big thing at the moment. It's something we
Mm.
really need to be aware of coming in. But I suppose we'll take that from maybe if an individual is working from home, because obviously if they're on site and you're on site, you're probably going to be a little bit more aware of their workload. If they're working from home and they're saying they're too busy and they can take certain tasks from you, I would just kind of be reaching out to them and ensuring that they are, okay in terms of prioritizing tasks. Have Are they having an issue with kind of managing their priorities in terms of what work needs to be done? I suppose, as a priority and above the rest of the work. I would say as well, in terms of, that they're doing personal tasks in work time, I would just question as to how we know that. And if that's something that we are concerned about, maybe just having a very informal meeting with the employee and just checking in with them. And I suppose also it's very important when you do have an individual working remotely that you have a really, really strong remote working policy, and that we're making it very clear to staff what is expected of them at home from, the hours in work, and that they shouldn't be spending any work time doing any personal jobs or personal business. But yeah, that's what I would say in that instance.
Perfect. Thanks, Emily. And if I could just say, just on my own
Yeah.
previous life in dealing with insurance claims, for anyone who does have remote workers, please, please, please ensure you have a home working risk assessment done for your
Definitely.
staff. And if you want any info, feel free to give me a call and I'll get you up to date on what that entails. Okay, next one, Emily. I don't know the context around this, but I'm going to assume it's a disciplinary meeting.
Hmm.
Okay. If you are chairing a meeting, we'll assume it's a disciplinary meeting,
Yeah.
and the person who is attending keeps bringing other issues into the meeting. How can you deal with that?
I feel like this is a classic one. Anyone that's ever been involved or chaired any kind of meeting, whether it be a disciplinary meeting or not, it's definitely something that it does happen a lot. For ourselves, we would definitely recommend writing kind of a meeting agenda prior to going into the meeting. And this would be something that if it was a disciplinary meeting, as we're kind of assuming it is, the advisors would help you kind of structure the meeting in terms of what's that going to look like. So I would say have an agenda going in and try and make it kind of quite clear that we're sticking to the agenda. I suppose in a disciplinary meeting, individuals are probably being there or have been brought there to discuss maybe something that they may or may not have done incorrectly, and so they might be a little bit on the back foot. They're more likely to bring up a million and one other things that have no relevance to the meeting. So I suppose definitely we're always kind of gently and politely kind of redirect them back to what we're discussing, and stick to that. If it's something that they continue to bring up, I would just say, look, this is not the purpose of the meeting, and we can always schedule another meeting at a later date. If it's a grievance that they would like to bring up, anything like that, they obviously have the absolute option to discuss anything or bring anything to the manager's attention. But that particular meeting is not laid out for that. It's for whatever the disciplinary process is. So yeah, gentle reminders, have your agenda, and give them an offer of another meeting at a later date to discuss something else or whatever they bring up.
Perfect, perfect. Okay, how do I deal with constant lateness? And with how do I deal with people's lack of communication and long-term staff that is not accommodating change? I don't know if it's the same question. Maybe it's just two questions in one.
Absolutely. So we'll look at constant lateness first, because obviously that's a separate thing to the other part of the question. So
Mhm.
if we're looking at lateness, I suppose this is definitely a performance issue, and it's something that it's really important to keep track of as well. So if an individual is consistently late, that would be considered kind of a disciplinary issue. So it would be something where you would obviously let the individual know that this is, an ongoing issue? Is there obviously anything that we should be aware of that is causing them to be late? From that well-being perspective, we're ensuring that everything is okay. And if it is just kind of, they just don't really care, they're not too bothered, then it would be something that you would begin, I suppose, a bit of a disciplinary process with. And this is where we say it's really important to keep track of everything and keep records, because if we let it go and then on the fifth time the individual is late, we want to have an issue about it now, or we want to create a disciplinary process about it now, we need to make sure that we have flagged it and we have the information and the evidence, and that we haven't just left them get away with it all the time and now we have an issue. This is where the consistency comes in, and this would be within your policies and procedures as well. Consistent lateness would be a form of misconduct. So yeah, it would be definitely something that I would be discussing with the employee, and definitely if it was the case of where it was a consistent issue, starting a disciplinary process then.
Okay, and just the
What was the
second
other part of
aspect,
that? Yeah.
the second aspect was, how do I deal with people's lack of communication and long-term staff that is not accommodating change? I suppose that is not the same thing. If the communication is not there,
Yeah.
you're going to have difficulties accommodating change.
Definitely, and it can be really difficult, especially if you have long-term staff. You might have just come in as a new manager, you might have taken over the business, and it might have been a choopy transfer or whatever the case may be. It is extremely difficult, and this is why we say sometimes with HR and employment law and managing staff and stuff like that, it is a little bit of a long game. We're there to, I suppose, try and get them on the same team as ourselves. If it's a lack of communication, I would be kind of, I suppose, reaching out to them, letting them know the expectations that we have within the company in terms of communication. This is the level of communication that we expect. And if it's ongoing, I'd like to know in terms of what the exact issue is in relation to the communication. What are they not communicating about? But if it's a little bit more of an individual query, maybe they might reach out to yourself, Mandy, or myself, whatever the case may be, maybe to discuss it further rather than putting more information into the chat.
Perfect. Thanks, Emily. I think we'll do
Not at
one
all.
more because I'm
Yeah.
conscious of the time. Okay, biggest staff issue. So this particular person has their biggest staff issue is that they don't do as they're asked on a far too regular basis. The company is in the process of implementing a much stricter regime with firm consequences for poor performance. So interested to hear about disciplinary measures that are common and successful. So I suppose that would come back to the policies really, wouldn't it?
Definitely. So I suppose if people are, or if employees are not doing what they're asked, and this is something that is ongoing, that would be what we would call insubordination. So they're obviously then not communicating or responding or respecting the chain of management. In that kind of sense, I suppose we would say this is where a really strong, as you said, Mandy, policy and procedure comes in. Obviously, this is an individual. Seems to be a number of staff that they're having a similar issue with. So it's something that needs to be checked with every staff member. So I would be kind of reaching out to the individual, but prior to that, definitely making sure that you have a really, really strong policy and procedure. There's a number of different kind of disciplinary outcomes that you could look at, but you really wouldn't be looking at any of those until after the process had been complete. So I couldn't say, oh yeah, right, give them a verbal warning or a written warning.
Yeah.
We need to do the policy and the procedure first and see what the outcome is from that naturally.
Brilliant, Emily. Thanks. I'm gonna
No worries.
put a stop there. Just like I said, I'm conscious of the time.
Yeah.
I want to say thank you to you. Fabulous and informative as always.
Thanks so much, Mandy.
To everybody who attended, thank you so much. We do hope you found it informative. I know there's an awful lot of information to cover in a very short
There's
period
a
of
lot
time.
there.
We could probably keep on talking for the next hour. You've all been very good to give us half an hour of your time this morning. So if at any point you'd like to avail a half an hour of my time, I'm more than happy to give it to you, answer any specific or individual questions that you might have, or if you want me to look through your documents, be them HR or health and safety, I'm more than happy to do that. For those questions we didn't get to, we will contact you directly. and answer those specific questions for those individuals. And myself or my colleagues will be in contact with you over the next day or so. And if you would like to book in a consultation with myself at no cost whatsoever, you're more than happy or more than welcome to do so. Emily, thank you so much, and everybody
Thank
have a
you
wonderful
so
day.
much, Mandy.
You're very welcome. Take care.